The storm came in low and mean, dragging itself across the ridgeline like an old sorrow that wouldn't die. It breathed through the tall pines in bitter gasps, rattling branches like bones, clawing at shutters and old fences on the edge of the valley. And in the middle of it, where the wind screamed loudest and the rain beat like fists on the earth, he drove. No music in the truck. Just the steady hum of the heater and the tired creak of worn-out wipers brushing aside the dark Caleb. Dunn didn't mind storms. In fact, he welcomed them. They drowned out the memories, blurred the edges of the nights he didn't talk about. Out here on the backroads, past the county line and farther still from the hospital where the machines had gone silent years ago, there was only him, the wheel, and the ache that never quite left. The world had narrowed for him after Emily, time bent in strange ways. His days filled with the motion of surviving building fences, fixing broken steps for neighbors too old to ask. But his nights? His nights were hollowed out and echoing. He didn't drink, didn't date, didn't answer when the past called either. He just waited for each morning, like a man counting hours until it was time to sleep again. It was supposed to be a short run. A couple of space heaters dropped off at the reservation line for a grandmother he used to know. He hadn't even meant to take the long way back. But something in the road ahead shimmered off-color, not natural, and by the time he hit the brakes he saw them, three small shapes. Huddled together like birds caught out of season, triplets. They couldn't have been older than 6? Soaking wet, silent, holding hands so tightly he could see the tension in their knuckles. Through the blur of the storm, his breath caught, not from fear, but from something far older and sadder than that. He stepped out, coat already slapping. In the wind, boots sinking into mud as he approached slowly, voice barely above the howl. "Hey," he said, gentle as he could. "You girls all right?" They didn't answer. The middle one had her jaw clenched, shivering too hard to speak. The tallest held a cracked plastic bag against her chest like it held her world. The smallest? She wasn't crying, just staring at him wide-eyed and unreadable, like a deer watching snow fall for the first time. He crouched low. "You're safe now," he said, unsure whether it was for them or for himself. "Let's get you warm." No one moved. Then, after a beat, the middle girl stepped forward, barefoot, trembling, and placed something small and crumpled in his hand. A receipt. Faded, wet, scribbled in pencil. "Please, take care of them." Caleb's heart stilled. He looked up sharply, scanning the trees, the road, the ditch. No other footprints. No sign of a vehicle. Just the girls and the note and the pounding. Rain that felt heavier all of a sudden. He didn't ask questions. Didn't wait to make sense of it. He picked them up one by one and carried them to the truck, cranking the heat until the vents wheezed. He laid his worn jacket across their legs, found an old thermos of warm cocoa he hadn't touched earlier, and handed it over without a word. The girls didn't speak. Didn't cry? They just sat close, like they were trying to disappear into each other's warmth. And Caleb, he just drove. Past the split in the road where his grief always pulled him, toward the old cabin on the ridge where no one had been but him, that night. He lit the fire for the first time in weeks. He laid blankets on the worn-out couch, found socks that used to be Emily's and placed them by the hearth. And when the storm battered the window panes like it was trying to break in, he sat on the floor across from 3 silent girls who didn't even know his name and felt, for the first time in years, the echo of something human stirring beneath his ribs. They didn't ask who he was, and he didn't tell them what he'd lost. But in the quiet between the crackle of fire and the whimper of wind, one of them softly offered him the corner of her blanket. Like maybe, just maybe, he was cold too. Morning came slow. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered in puddles and bent branches, in the hush that settles over a forest after it's been shaken. The sky was bruised but clearing, letting shafts of pale light fall through the cabin's old windows like fingers reaching for something they hadn't touched in years, Asterisk Caleb stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. He hadn't slept. Not really. Just sat near the fire, eyes half closed, ears tuned to the tiny breathing sounds from the couch where the girls had curled together. Like fox kits in winter. Asterisk, they hadn't spoken, not in the truck, not by the fire. And yet they hadn't looked away from him either, as if they were waiting to see what kind of man he was. Without needing to hear him say it, asterisk, he placed a pan of eggs on the stove, cracked each shell slowly, methodically. Routine grounded him. It always had. The little things, folding towels, measuring coffee, fixing hinges, were how he kept the ghosts at bay. Asterisk, and yet, with each clink of a fork or scrape of a skillet, something softer stirred. A memory, a moment. Asterisk, Emily's laugh while dancing in this same kitchen barefoot, singing to the radio off-key. Asterisk, the sound of tiny footsteps that never got to echo long enough. He blinked hard. Behind him, there was movement. Small feet padding over worn floorboards, the lightest cough. A creak of the couch cushions. He turned. 3 pairs of eyes watched him. The tallest sat up first, her long dark hair tangled like seaweed, her chin lifted with a quiet kind of bravery. The middle one clung to the other's sleeve. The smallest, she hugged a threadbare stuffed rabbit like it was made of glass. Asterisk, still no words. Just the hush of shared uncertainty. Asterisk, you hungry? He asked, voice low, careful not to scare whatever. Trust had begun to bloom. Asterisk, the middle girl nodded first. Just once, asterisk, he slid the eggs onto plates, added toast, then paused before placing forks beside each. Instead, he knelt down and set the plates in front of them gently. Like serving guests he wasn't sure would stay. Asterisk, they ate in silence, not out of fear but reverence. Like food was too rare to waste on talking. Asterisk, after. The oldest girl stood and carried their empty dishes to the sink, unprompted. He caught her glance toward the photo frame near the window. It was face down. Asterisk, she didn't ask about it. But her gaze lingered. Asterisk, later. As the sun pushed through the clouds and snow began to melt into thin streams along the gravel path, Caleb took them outside. Gave them thick socks and his late wife's jackets that were too big but warm. He let them help gather kindling, watching how they moved together never more than a few feet apart, always holding on somehow. Asterisk, it was the way the middle one limped. Slightly when she thought no one was looking that made him pause. Asterisk, he knelt beside her in the snow. That hurt a while ago? He asked gently, nodding to her ankle. Asterisk, she looked up at him, finally and for the first time spoke. Just one word. Asterisk, before. Asterisk, he didn't ask more. Didn't need to. Asterisk, that night they watched the fire again. He read from one of the old children's books Emily had kept in a chest that hadn't been opened in 5 years. His voice cracked. Twice, but he didn't stop. Asterisk, when he reached the final page, the smallest girl whispered, "Will you read it again?" He did, and when the flames died low and the moonlight turned the walls silver, the tallest of the girls walked over and placed something in his palm, a crumpled photograph. Of the 3 of them, younger, happier, standing beside a woman with tired eyes and a smile like sunlight. Asterisk, written on the back. In the same shaky pencil. Asterisk, their names are Marin, Layla, and June. Keep them safe. Asterisk, his breath caught. The note from the road. The photo. The way June, the smallest, curled against his knee like it was hers to lean on. Asterisk, he looked at them again. At the girls in his home, breathing quiet and calm, like they'd finally stopped running. Asterisk, he didn't say he'd keep them. Not yet. Asterisk, but he added more wood to the fire, pulled out a blanket from the cedar chest, sat closer than he had the night before, and when June reached up and placed her small hand over his, he didn't pull away. Snow returned quietly 2 nights later. Asterisk, not a storm, just soft flurries, drifting like ash from a sky that had stopped mourning but hadn't quite learned to hope again. The girls had been there for 5 days now. 5 long, slow days of silence, softening into small sounds, a laugh here, a whisper there. June had begun humming to herself when she thought no one was listening. Layla had started drawing on scraps of cardboard with old colored pencils Caleb found in a drawer. And Marin, Eldest had taken to folding his flannels and placing them in a neat stack near the fire. UNASKED**. They hadn't spoken about leaving. Caleb hadn't asked when or if someone would come for them. There was something fragile in the space between them all, like frost on a window, beautiful but breakable. That evening, while the girls built a crook snowman near the shed, Caleb sat at the old workbench, oiling the hinges of a wooden box he hadn't touched in years. Emily had carved it the winter before everything fell apart. The lid still bore the curve of her handwriting, burnt into the grain, for what matters most. Inside were her old letters, birthday notes she never got to give. One for their son, one for Caleb, one that simply read, "For when it's time." He hadn't opened that one. He closed the box slowly and turned, just as Lila appeared in the doorway, her cheeks pink from cold. She held something out to him, one of her drawings. Scribbled in soft blue and brown, shaky but clear, the cabin. The snow, and 4 small figures standing outside, holding hands, "I drew us," she said, almost too softly to hear Caleb swallowed. His voice caught in his throat, "You did good." He managed later that night, as the fire crackled and wind curled beneath the door. Marin asked a question, "Do you believe in second chances?" The words dropped like pebbles into a well. No one moved. Even June stopped humming. Caleb leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I didn't," he said honestly. "For a long time," Marin nodded as if she already knew. "We didn't either. Mama, she tried, she really did. But people stopped seeing her after a while, and then we had to go." Lila reached out and took her sister's hand. June stared at the fire. "She left us somewhere she thought we'd be found," Marin added, her voice cracking now. "She said the world is still full of good men, but we only found you." Only the word clung to him. He looked down at his hands, calloused, scarred, clumsy. Hands that had built fences, buried dreams, held a child that never got to grow old. "What if I'm not enough?" He whispered. And then unexpected June stood, walked across the room on socked feet, and placed something in his lap, a locket, old, bent, but still clinging to its chain. He recognized it. It had belonged to Emily. He opened it slowly, hands trembling. Inside 2 tiny pictures, one of him, one of her. "Faded," laughing. "I found it in the blanket box," June said quietly. "She was pretty." Caleb looked at them, these 3 girls, each with stories they weren't ready to tell. Eyes far older than their years. "She would have loved you," he said. Barely above a breath. Silence folded around them like snow, and then, almost shyly, Marin asked, "Can we stay a little longer?" Caleb didn't answer right away. He stood, walked to the old desk in the corner, and opened the drawer that had remained locked since Emily's final day. Inside was the folded paper for when it's time. His fingers shook as he opened it. The handwriting was faded, but still hers. "If you're reading this, it means you've been alone long enough. Let the light in. Caleb, even broken men can build a home, and love doesn't leave it waits." He turned around. 3 pairs of eyes were watching him, holding their breath, standing at the edge of something too big to name. He nodded. "You can stay." That night he didn't sleep in the chair. He spread a second mattress near the fire and laid beside them as June snuggled against his side. Layla curled behind his back, and Marin at last rested her head on his shoulder. No one said anything more. They didn't need to. A locket, a letter. 3 girls, and the sound of a man remembering how to breathe again. Spring came late that year. It didn't arrive in a rush, but crept in slow like healing does. The snow melted reluctantly in small pockets along the hillside. The birds came back quiet at first, as if waiting to see if the silence had softened. And in the cabin on the ridge, life began to move gently, like someone rediscovering the rhythm of breath. Caleb had built a swing, not a fancy one, just an old tire, tied with thick rope to the tall pine behind the cabin. But to June it was magic. She'd raced toward it barefoot, her hair flying like it had never been cut, her laughter breaking against the trees like a hymn. Layla, quieter, would sketch her sister in motion, crouched in the sun with pencil smudges on her cheek. And Marin, who had taken to reading the old books aloud by the window, now helped Caleb tend the garden Emily once planted but never saw bloom. Asterisk. They still didn't talk much about where they came from. Some hurts live too deep for easy words. Asterisk, but the hurt began to take shape. One afternoon, while planting seeds, Marin said softly, "She used to hum when she cooked, Mama. Just little things, but we knew what mood she was in by the tune." Asterisk, Caleb nodded. Emily used to sing to the tomatoes. Swore it made them sweeter. Asterisk, Leela smiled. Maybe it worked. Asterisk, small roots. Quiet stories. That's how families are born, sometimes not in grand gestures, but in the way people begin to trust you with the truth. Asterisk, one evening, while tucking them in, Caleb asked gently, "If you girls ever wanted, we could make something official." Asterisk, he tried not to make it heavy. Just a soft suggestion in the stillness. Asterisk, June sat up. "You mean, like papers?" Asterisk, he nodded. "Yeah, like adoption? If you wanted." They looked at each other, a glance that passed like wind between leaves. Then Marin asked, "Would we still get to call you Caleb?" Asterisk, he blinked. "You could call me whatever feels right." A beat. Then Lila whispered, "Can we try Dad just once?" It broke something open in him, and it built something stronger in its place. "Yes," he said, voice cracking. "Please." Asterisk, they didn't rush into his arms. That wasn't their way. Asterisk, instead, June slid over and placed her head against his chest, one hand curling into the fabric of his shirt like a promise. Leela rested her head on his arm. And Marin finally pulled the blanket over all three of them, as if sealing something sacred. Asterisk, that night, he pulled out the last letter. One he hadn't dared touch. It was for their son, the one he and Emily had lost before the world grew cold. Asterisk, he walked outside, under the soft rustle of pines, and read it by moonlight. "Our boy never got to see the world, but maybe, just maybe, the world is giving you 3 more chances to be a father. Open the door, let them in." Asterisk, he folded the letter, placed it back inside the box, then stood in the quiet dark, eyes closed, arms folded across his chest. Asterisk, and for the first time in years he wept, but it wasn't grief anymore, it was gratitude. Weeks passed, papers were signed. The court date came and went with little fanfare, just a gentle affirmation before a quiet judge, who looked at the 3 girls clinging to the man beside them and smiled like she'd seen something holy. Asterisk. They walked out as a family, done, all of them now. Asterisk, at home. The girls painted their names on wooden signs and stuck them in the garden. Marin, Lila, June. And beneath them, in childish scrawl, one more asterisk, Dad. The swing still moved in the breeze. The fire still crackled each night. Asterisk, but now there were voices in the hallway, drawings on the fridge, and footsteps that echoed with life instead of absence. Asterisk, he still missed Emily, always would, but now, when he stood in the doorway watching the girls play, he felt her presence not as a shadow but as warmth in the sun. Asterisk, one night, as he tucked them in, Marin placed something on his pillow. Asterisk, a folded scrap of paper. Their handwriting. All 3. It read, "You were the only one who stopped in the storm. You saw us. You stayed. Asterisk, you were the light." He held it to his chest and sat quietly by the fire until morning. And when he finally closed his eyes, he didn't dream of loss anymore. He dreamed of laughter, of warmth, asterisk, of home.